All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. There's still a few people entering, and Jen Shafter, my partner here, is going to let people in as they come in. So we'll just start it slow and do introductions. My name is Megan Sweeney, and my partner Jen Shafter and I will be your hosts for this evening's event. And we are joined by the lovely and talented Lynn Nadeau, Jonathan Letterman, Dan Albert, Jim Zisson, and Tom McMahon. And I thank all of you for joining us and taking the time to prepare your presentations and to speak to us and be the community leaders that you are. Thank you. Tonight begins our Main Street Democracy Campaign. And this is going to lead us all the way into town meeting and town elections. Each month, we are going to have an in-person event as well as hopefully some in-person pop-up events at various stores around town. Tonight, we will talk about our citizens articles. We have 5 citizen-sponsored articles to talk about. And we will ask you and tell you how you can help us get them passed at town meeting. Each article requires a sponsor, a citizen sponsor, and those folks are the ones who will present tonight and tell you a little bit about their articles. Each time that we do talk about the articles, we are going to try sort of an interactive approach. And I know it's a little bit awkward with Zoom, but we do want an opportunity for you to talk as well, not just listen to all of us talk. We will close the session with our thoughts on the state of the town presentation that was provided to us last week. There was a lot to cover for the state of the town, so I think we are going to make that its own separate event. I think it's just too much to cram into one night. Tonight's objective is to inform and empower you, and to most importantly normalize citizen engagement both in town meeting and to make the democracy, this part of democracy, a little bit more inviting without making people feel that they have to be an expert on a subject. Our promise is to find ways to make this a conversation more than a bunch of us talking heads telling you all about these citizen articles and boring you to tears. We do want to make this fun. We do encourage your participation. What we're thinking of is that once, for instance, I tell you about my article that I'm sponsoring, I'll pause and offer the chat box will obviously be open, so you can always engage with us that way. But what I hope you'll do is actually raise your electronic hand so that we can talk to you and answer your questions about our various articles and ideas that you have. A few housekeeping items. We are going to be recording, which obviously everybody has to say okay to that when we start. But the idea for that is so that once it's complete, we can share it. We can each share it amongst our networks and keep the conversation going. Everyone will be muted during the presentations, but again, we are going to be inviting everybody to talk. So please do. And if talking is not, public speaking is not your thing, then like I said, use the chat function. Within that, our community leaders that are here who are running for office, I'm asking all of you to please put that in, whether you're a featured guest or just in the audience. Please drop your contact information into the chat box, telling people what office you're running for so that people can circle back with you if they've got questions thereafter. Trying to think of what else. Transitions are a little bit tricky between, trying to get everybody to talk and to try and make sure the questions are answered. So just bear with us, and I'm sure we'll get through this and still have a little bit of fun. And our next session will be in March, and I think that will cover all of our housekeeping items, and people are still coming in, so it's perfect timing.
Sweater dress with a dress.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so a little bit about me. Again, I'm Megan Sweeney. I am the founder of Power Up, community organizer, and I've grew up in Virginia, outside DC, and my mom, moved here when I was in college, and I've been here ever since. I asked each of us to think of our favorite quote and to put it in just sort of to get to know us quote. And mine is from Dr. Angela Davis, and it says, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time." And whenever I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I think of that message, and you just do a little bit each day, a little bit, whatever time you have, and that helps and it contributes. My partner in crime is the one and only Jen Schaffner. She is on the executive council. She has been with me from the beginning, and I don't know what I would do without her. She is the founder and editor of Marblehead Beacon, which is a media platform that launched right about June of last year. And she has done an outstanding job. She and her team have done an outstanding job of being a partner in our democracy. And she is also an appointee by the governor on the Marblehead Housing Board. And she is just wonderful to work with.
Thanks, Megan.
Our guests are here as well, and I'm going to pass over to my partner so she can introduce you to everybody. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Megan. Can you hear me okay? Everyone hear me? I apologize, I didn't get the memo for the favorite quote. So I'll speak off the cuff, but probably Bill Belichick, do your job. That's probably one of the things I like to live by. So we have several featured guests tonight, which we're thrilled to have. First, we have Jim Zisson, former candidate and candidate for Board of Select Board. And he is going to be talking about his citizen article tonight. We have Tom McMahon, also candidate for Board of Health, who is, their quotes are here. You guys, folks can read that. Tom's going to chat a little bit about some of his experiences and some of the goals that he has and would like to see in terms of change in our community. We have Linda Doe, community activist, has been a very active member here in town for many years and has been just a huge proponent for expanding open meetings and trying to expand the governance with her town meeting article, which she will be talking about. And then we have, kind of losing the
Can you see it, Dan?
Oh, Dan Albert. Also community activist, who will be talking about his article around traffic safety, which is very important, has a lot of moving parts, literally, but is going to be very important for us to hear about. And we also have Jonathan Letterman here tonight, longtime member of Marblehead School Committee, also very active in the community, and will be speaking about his article around some election details there. So he'll have that when it comes to his turn. Did I get everybody? Because I'm missing the bottom of the slide. Yeah.
I know. Sorry about that. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yes, you are. All right. Just a little bit of why we're here. Just a little transition between all of that information is, and sort of a takeaways, if you will, that we would like for you to have, not only working with us, but also in these presentations is about making connections. It's about initiating a dialogue and talking about the topics that matter here in town, and creating, almost as important, and creating space for new and emerging leaders. It's really hard to break into the governance of Marblehead. And I think it's really important to have a group of people that you can say, hey, how does this work? And where would I best fit? These are my skills. Which board would be better for me? Where can I make the most impact? And within that is connecting all of the voters to each other, to the issues, and to the power that they have in town meeting and town elections. And I know that personally, I had no idea how important town meeting was until a few years ago. And once you start digging in, you realize that, you know, most of the issues that we think are important can be presented and funded and discussed at town meetings. So it's very important to be there. Our first guest, if he's ready, is Jim Zisson, and he's going to talk to you about his citizen-sponsored article. Jim, I'll give it to you, buddy.
Okay, thank you. Am I on the video or?
You are right. I see your face. Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we do things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. Probably sounds like something that's familiar to people. Actually, that was John F. Kennedy in 1962 at Rice University, more or less kicking off the United States going to the moon, which he said within 10 years, and in fact, 7 years later, the US landed on the moon, and we haven't been back since, but we're working on it. And as someone that's been in the aviation industry for 40 years, I will tell you, doing that in the 1960s is still amazing, because we haven't done it since, and we're trying to do it now. But anyhow, that brings us to Marblehead, where things don't come easy. And there's a lot of tradition, and tradition is good. And but one of the traditions we have a very unique select board format. It's a 1-year term. Every year, all 5 positions are up for grabs. Even seasoned voters, people that have voted year after year, many always seem surprised at that, as if, you know, they don't know, because it is an odd format. And, you know, why is that so? Well, it has been that way since 1649. And in 1649, a 1-year term, I think probably made a lot of sense, because the average lifespan was 38 years. So giving up 1 year of your life, the town, was probably quite a bit. The other thing that people don't think, in 1649, there was no such thing as a true header, because no one was born here. The people running would have been born in England, and they didn't know a heck of a lot about each other. And not only that, they didn't have the internet, which might surprise a few people, but so it made a lot of sense. And some people stayed on for a year, some people stayed on for a couple of years and got elected. And but you know, the point is, back then they were just trying to put basic framework around government from mostly people that escaped from Salem because it was too puritanical. So why change? Well, you know, it would align with the other 8 boards in town that have 3-year terms. The only exceptions to that are Park and Rec and the moderator. The moderator is, of course, not a board, it's a special thing. But the reason you'd want to do it is really it's about governance. First of all, you know, for starters, you have 5 people running for re-election every year. That's in a 12-month period. That's putting 2 campaigns together. And, you know, I think we'd at this point in time rather see people working on governance than campaigning, you know, virtually 24/7. The other thing that people forget, they tend to think of select board as a legislative branch, like a city council is. It's not. It's the executive branch of the government. So it functions collectively like a mayor or a governor or president. And you just don't see 1-year terms for executives, because, you know, there's a lot of long-term strategies and initiatives and plans that really have to be developed over a long time. And, you know, the other thing is with a 1-year term, it's very easy to be tempted to pander to voters, you know, because you're always thinking about, you know, that re-election campaign, and memories of people are relatively short, but in a 1-year term, you know, that's something that's always going to be in the back of people's mind. But, you know, getting back to the governance piece, you know, we're really looking for, when new members come in, an opportunity to learn and listen, and then, you know, eventually lead. And there's a lot of pressure if a new member comes in the first year to, you know, get out of the box really fast. And the truth is, all 5 are competing against each other, and competition is good. We don't really want everyone to agree, but, you know, at a certain point, it kind of gets to be a bit too much of a competition. And we have, you know, we've been fortunate that we've had a lot of people like the Judy Jacobys that have been willing to serve for a long period of time. And so we're kind of used to that, but that's not always going to be the way. And you could have, you know, potential actually for having 5 freshman select board members. And, you know, would that be a good idea? I don't think anyone really thinks that would be a good idea. The other thing that comes up is, you know, people say, and this was said 2 years ago when we brought the 3-year staggered term forth, is, you know, we want the opportunity to, quote, throw the bums out. Well, with the 3-year term, the idea is don't let the bums in to begin with, because you're going to have a much narrower field running. You know, it's 1 or 2 open seats, and, you know, typically you might have 1, 2, 3, or 4 people running, as opposed to a minimum 5, maybe 7. A couple of years ago, 16. You know, kind of, and it allows a better focus on the candidates. And, you know, sometimes that's hard to convince people, but the fact is we have 8 elected boards with 3-year terms, and there really hasn't been huge issues with someone getting in and, you know, really being out of place. And, you know, the other thing is people mentioned a recall. We don't have a recall anywhere in Marblehead, and I would recommend we probably don't need it, because in today's day and age, the voters, Marblehead voters are pretty sophisticated. They do their homework, they research their candidates, and you know, it's not the issue that, you know, it might have been 375 years ago. You know, the other piece is commitment. The town is complicated. You know, back in 1649, they were really worried about fences, right? That was a big topic at town meeting. Still is, but they were really worried about fences. But now, you know, you listen to Thatcher Keyser, he's talking about cloud computing, you know, ARPA funding. You know, you have to hire experts to do, you know, ARPA funding. And we really need people to come in and get 3 years of, you know, listening, learning, and then, you know, leadership for the long haul. And, you know, respecting the tradition piece, that's important. You know, Marblehead is full of tradition, and we have to respect that. But, you know, when you really think of it, we preserved Abbott Hall, Fort Sewell, the old townhouse. The old townhouse has bathrooms and an elevator now. You know, it didn't, you know, back in the day. And even if you look at town meeting itself, the 1649 town meeting, guess what? If you were a woman, you couldn't go, and you certainly couldn't be a select man either. And it was actually 7 members, not 5. So, you know, that's a very little known fact, but it was 7. So we're down to 5. And so we've progressed very nicely over a period of time to 5 men and women on the select board, Zoom calls, which we're still taking a while to get used to. And even the town administrator is a recent addition going back to the 1990s. At one time, as recent as the 1990s, the idea was the select board ran the town day to day. And, you know, so we've moved on, and I think it's pretty obvious. I don't think we'd ever want to move back to any of those things. So the other thing, you know, before I finish up, I want to keep this brief, is this would have no impact on the coming election in June. In fact, this would then have to go to the legislature, just like a lot of our things, to be approved by a special act of a home rule petition. And the idea is hopefully by 2024 it would be in place. And in 2024 only, it would be a special election to set up the stagger of the term. And by stagger, we mean in any given year, there'd be either 2, and then in a third year, 1 candidate running. And the way that stagger would be set up in that 2024 election is the highest 2 vote getters would get a 3-year term. The second 2 highest would get a 2-year term, and the last would get a 1-year term. And then after that, your stagger would be set up permanently. So, you know, this is all about a little tweak, keeping tradition alive. No one wants to get rid of the select board. No one wants to get rid of town meeting. No one wants to get rid of open town meeting. It's just one more little tweak, recognizing that it's the year 2023. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be willing to listen. Questions or comments or suggestions. We still have a while before we go to town meeting, so we want to hear what people think.
I think I see Sarah Fox has raised her hand. Jen, can you unmute her?
Yeah, let me, hang on.
Thank you, madam.
I think I should be unmuted.
Ah, there you are. Hello.
Hi, I apologize. I'm in the car waiting to pick up kids, so that's a bit
No,
informal here.
No
I
apologies.
just want to speak from the point of view of someone who serves a 3-year term. I really think that this is a great concept for our select board. I think that it really inhibits people from being effective in their role, these constant 1-year terms. versus serving a 3-year term. There is somewhat of, there's a learning curve, but also, you know, you can be much more effective when you can look at your own, you know, if you will, strategic plan of the things you want to be part of, the things you want to help spearhead. In 1 year just isn't enough to help get this stuff done. So I think it would really maximize efficacy for all of our select board members to have that 3-year term, and be able to just maximize outcomes for people in the town. So I'm really grateful that Jim is giving a go at this again. And I sincerely hope it passes, because I really think it's to the benefit of our residents.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think everyone knows, but you know, that's from someone that had a first 3-year term of listening and learning, and in her fourth year or first year of her second 3-year term, she became chair of the school. Obviously use that 3-year period to learn and grow and so forth. So thank you.
Looks like Penny Blaisdell has her hand up. Penny.
Hi there. I think I'm off mute. I think it's a great idea. Absolutely. I didn't realize that it was voted down at the last town meeting. Why was it voted down? Was it a close, close ballot?
yeah.
I understand people like tradition.
It was, there's several things, Penny. It was close. First of all, it was close. And it was actually even debatable. That was actually in the outdoor venue, and it was at the end of town meeting, and the seats had got all messed up and turned around. But I'm not using that as an excuse. The other part of it is COVID was still going in, and I brought that forth. I did not, first of all, I didn't have any venue like this. I did not do really any preparation, and besides a couple letters to the editor to get the word out, to be honest with you. And I had my hands full with some other things. And, it was, Marblehead is very big on traditions. And I think there was a reason I didn't bring it back last year, give it a little bit of a wait. And I think I've had a much better chance, better opportunity to spread it around, because 2 years ago, we were all wearing masks, and you couldn't, people weren't going to select board meetings, and you didn't see people that you had a chance to talk to. So that's a great question, Penny, and I'm very bullish on the prospects for this year. So
Well, it's a great idea and a long time coming. Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Penny. I think we have 2 other people raised their
Yeah,
hand.
and we have one in the chat too. So I would say I think in order was Erin, Brett, and then E. So
Okay.
let's go with Erin. I think you were next. Erin Noonan.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Jim, for bringing this back. It's time. It's long overdue. I think that there's a number of reasons why every other town and most all of our other boards in town have a 3-year term. I can't think of really a reason why, there'd be a benefit to having a 1-year term. I think obviously there's a lot of, it's difficult. Sometimes elected officials need to make decisions that are politically unpopular, and this 1-year term really kind of, creates a situation where that's bad in terms of governance. I just would encourage people, if you feel empowered, to write letters to the editor, and we need to sort of drum up some buzz around it and make sure people know to raise their hand for this article, what it means. And I'll be speaking to it at town meeting. I can write a letter to the editor. I remember Jonathan Letterman made a really, I thought, impactful, powerful statement at town meeting when this was last raised. So we need to get people to line up to the mic to speak and go in favor of this, because it's really important to a democratic process, really, in this town. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Erin. And you're living it, so your comments are very impactful. And
it's extremely time consuming. It can have sometimes financial consequences in terms of people feel you're competing. All of us are competing. You have new challengers coming in, and you want to not take it for granted. right? So you want to get out there and do it and campaign, even, not take your seat for granted. That's how I feel. And so if, I'll be out there campaigning alongside Jim and Brett, and I'll do it every year, but it is really inefficient. It's unnecessary, and it's not good. It's not good for the process as a whole, frankly. So thanks so much again, Jim, for
Thank you.
leading.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.
Let's go to Brett Murray.
Oh, Brett.
Brett, are you unmuted?
There you go. Good evening, everybody. And yeah, same here, Jim. I can't thank you enough for, sponsoring this. I signed, that. And I hope to speak to it also at town meeting. I can tell you, as somebody, when I won for the first time about 8 years ago, I was elected on a Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, I had about a 2-hour meeting with Tony Sasso, and then Chair Jackie Belfecker, and that was my onboard. And the select board wears numerous hats, and there's just so much that goes on. No matter how many meetings you attend, no matter how many documents you read, you really, there's just, as Erin said, there's so much preparation, but it's different when you actually physically sit at that table as a voting member. And I just can't stress enough that there is that onboarding period, and it does take individual time, and to give them that time and that opportunity, I just, the 3-year makes complete. And so again, there's other people who want to speak, and there's other things. So thank you, and thank you for allowing me to put my 2 cents in.
Thank you, Brett. And again, that's from someone that's lived it. And a lot of people don't realize you start the next day after election. So you got to stay out of the riptide, that election nights.
So we have, I think it's Beanie Eisner.
Yeah. Hi.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Jim, I agree with everybody. Like, this is a great article. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it makes sense for the town. If it's okay, just to offer a little bit of feedback on what you just presented to us. The one thing, it strikes me at town meeting, to get something through a town meeting, there's like an art of the presentation that's really important. I last year thought Rick Smyers was actually like kind of masterful at how he presented our little bike park thing, which in some ways wasn't controversial, but like, if you know the backstory of that, there were actually people that were going to stand up and contest that a little bit. So the only thing that I would encourage you is, between now and town meeting, I would say 2 things. Number one is the people that are fighting this are like, I think we need to, I think you, and I think actually all of us, it's important to validate some of the concerns that they maybe have. Like, this didn't pass just because it was like a COVID year, or because, maybe Gary was a little bit like, that was a complicated meeting. Like, there were things going on. And I, from my understanding, from my memory, I actually think that this has come up even before you presented it. Like, I think it was something that like Jackie and Judy originally went for. So there's like kind of an undercurrent of like concern. And I think what I would say is what I would encourage you to do is like kind of tighten up the presentation a little bit, focus on the benefit while also valuing some of the things that people have concern with, and like pushing through those as well, if that makes sense. And not to like silence anybody. There are going to be people that are going to stand up and say, this is not Marblehead and you're a transplanter, like whatever it is that they say. However, I actually do think that it's important to like kind of go in, from my own observation, with that sort of thoughtfulness, and also just like sort of a very concise presentation of the issue. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, do you prefer Elizabeth or Beanie?
Either is fine. It's like a,
Okay, because
Either one.
our buddy Linda calls you Beanie and I didn't know.
yeah, Linda calls me Beanie for sure.
I didn't know if I was allowed to, but no, those are points well taken. And I actually have my notes in front of me, but I have a much more formal presentation that I'm working on for the committee. And this was kind of speaking off the cuff. And Penny had a good question in the smaller audience. I would not say that. I would not make excuses I shouldn't say excuse in front of town meetings, say we lost because it was cold out and everyone went home. But that's point
Yeah.
well taken. And my wife always says, you have to, you said, validate people's concerns and not dismiss them. And that is very important. That's something I can, work in that, that 1 year term has worked for a while, but it's just time for a change. And the good thing about coming back, I listened to Deacon Joe Whipple spoke against it, Bill Conley, Jim Nye, we're all, very well respected members of leadership. So I've been thinking of, their comments and so forth. Well, and, those have to be, to your term, validated and considered and not just dismissed.
I think we've got a couple more questions, Jim. So I think if it's okay, we're gonna.
Yep.
Is that all right? Is that all right, Beanie? Are you done? I realize I cut you
Yeah,
off.
totally fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Beanie.
So I think we have Allison Taylor, and it looks like the last one. So why don't we finish up with Allison and we'll move on to the next presenter.
Hey,
Allison?
Jim, I think that this is fantastic and much needed. People often being the newest member and having just gone through the work and the level of effort that it takes to run a campaign, I think people don't understand the enormous amount of effort. And that's clearly going to take away from your family or your day job, but it would also take away if you're an existing member, and to have to do that every year, that just seems like the antithesis of working together and the antithesis of building a team. I look at this like a job, and in my day job, if I was working with a different team every single year, the lack of continuity and the lack of building on those strengths and developing the weaknesses wouldn't be there as a team together. And so I think I'm just really excited to see this back on. I'm excited that someone's going for this, and I can't wait to watch you present.
Okay, thank you again, Allison, for someone that just went through it. So thank you.
Great. I think, Megan, we can move to the next.
Oh, awesome. Okay,
presenter.
great. And for those of you who don't know, I think it's really important. I think Jim made a point of it as well, but those people that we just heard from are elected officials. Several of them are, seated elected officials, and supporting this. I think that's really important to acknowledge. So thank you, Jim, and thank you for everybody who spoke. That was.
And just one last thing, Megan, if
Sure.
anyone else has any thoughts after this, Megan has my email and so forth. You can send them to me and contact information. Thank you.
Can you,
Definitely, Jim.
Jim,
Sorry.
can you just put it, if you get a chance, maybe put your info in the chat?
Oh,
Thank you.
sure. Speaking of, still living in 1649.
It's okay, Jim.
Maybe we want to go back to a 6-month term.
All right, thank you. All right, next up is our Lynn Nadeau talking about accessible public meetings.
Yes, so just next to your face or some way or another, would you raise your hand or tell me if you've attended more meetings in the last years, in the years of COVID, than you did before? I did,
yeah, definitely.
Did you learn more because you went to more meetings? Did you meet more people, even if they were two-dimensional? Did you have more alignment with your goals and a stronger way of meeting your goals? I did. And in my work, in my environmental work, I went to the State House without leaving home. I went to people's offices without leaving home. I went to regulatory agencies, and I didn't leave my home, and I didn't use my car. I was definitely more efficient. That's why I gathered signatures for this Weren't you going to put it up there, Megan?
I am, darling. Yes, sorry.
Oh.
Yes, I was a little slow.
Wait a second. That's why I put a article to the last town meeting last year. And what it said was that all boards and committees, subject to the open meeting law, should have to be hybrid. Well, in the middle of town meeting, Cam came up to me and said, the FinCom would really like you to remove your article because we don't know how much it will cost to ensure that hybrid meetings are held. So I said, okay. And he said, we'll form a committee, and Gary Spees of our memory, who did so much good for the town, will form a committee. Well, he did form a committee, and the committee's been meeting till August, since August. And let me just tell you, I'm a little bit frustrated about the meeting that this committee that's having a lot of trouble coming up with numbers. So I changed the article so that it would pass, and it would be like the camel's nose under the tent. I picked the committees that you can see on your screen, saying that the town should insist these committees, not all of them, of course, not Fort Sewell Committee, not lots of little committees that don't meet too often, wouldn't have to obey this for now. But at any rate, so I changed the article and I made 2 articles out of it. One, which was that meetings for these people, these committees should be hybrid or remote. Could be all remote as far as I'm concerned. That's the way you can get people there. The other thing is after the meeting, what happens? Well, it takes like 2 months for the minutes to come out. The minutes can be biased. I'm not going to say that they are. I'm just going to say, seeing what actually happened at a meeting directly, not hearing it from a neighbor, not even, sorry, Jen, reading it in the paper, seeing it yourself if it's important to you and you know what's going on. So I have an article that requires these committees to record what happens at that meeting and make these recordings easily available. Let's say, oh, I want to tell you one more thing. There is a bill in the legislature requiring hybrid meetings for all elected boards. We don't know whether it'll pass. We don't know how it will affect the articles that I've brought up. I need to do more research on that. If there's anybody, I'll be talking with people in the State Department. I'll be talking with Jenny and Brendan about this to see how it'll work, but I intend to persist at town meeting and get our town. We could be first in revolution. We can be first in hybrid open meetings, hybrid or remote. And do I have anything more to say about that? I think that's about it.
Very nice. And any questions? I thought I saw somebody raise their hand, but I apologize. I lost track.
Sarah did.
Sarah Fox. Oh.
Can't hear Sarah.
Well, she was in the car. I wonder if she got, is
Sarah
she
can't
muted?
hear.
Oh, well. Sarah, shout it out when you come back. All right. Any other questions? Jen, I don't know if there's any in the chat or if there's anything else.
Everybody says this is not controversial.
Yeah.
All the people on the FinCom, all the people on the Moderators Committee, this is not controversial. It's just, we don't really know how to do it. It will cost us too much. We don't have Wi-Fi in enough rooms to be able to enable citizens to know what's going on in meetings. When you think about it and you think about the people, well, I happen to be on Tropical Island right now. Other people happen to be in cars and in other places. Other people have children that are hungry, and other people can have a chronic problem leaving home.
Mhm.
This is so important for everybody.
It is. And Lynn, you've done an outstanding job advocating month after month in these meetings. And we really appreciate your time. I know
Our
you
next
spent a lot of
meeting is
time.
tomorrow morning at 9. It's on the town
On the town website? Okay, perfect. All right, if there's no other questions, I think we'll
I
move
think Sarah
forward.
has the question. She's there now.
Oh, she does? Is she back?
Yeah. but she can't be heard again.
Sarah,
Sarah,
you're still muted
speak.
somehow.
I think she was on her phone too.
Now she's, yeah.
No? All right, Sarah, we're gonna keep moving and then we'll, when you figure it out, just.
I think
shout
everybody
it out.
agrees. That's why they're not saying anything, right?
Oh yeah, it is. So everybody vote May 1st. This is such an easy and there'll be.
That's
two-
right.
So easy. There's
Thank
two
you.
sections. Lynn broke it up in two sections. So one is the actual remote or hybrid. The second part will be that we have them recorded and easily accessible. Two really basic, simple articles. So, oh, here comes Sarah. I think Sarah got booted out. So we'll see when she comes back in what she has to say. But it should be very simple. If any of you are willing, we'd love to hear from you at town meeting. And same thing as Aaron suggested and Jim, writing letters to the editor, talking about this with your friends. Sarah Fox, are you back?
Yes, can you still hear me?
No, we're good. You go.
Oh, good, perfect. So this is an example of how I had to drive to pick up my kids, but I was able to still attend and hear what was going on. I can tell you firsthand as someone who has not only attended countless Zoom meetings, but has run simultaneous in-person and Zoom. We typically 70 to 100 to 200 people while functioning and running an entire full agenda. I am possibly the least tech savvy person I know. And I'm able to, as chair, facilitate those hybrid meetings with absolutely no problem. We are able to not only facilitate them, but then with literally one click, have them go live stream to YouTube, which auto uploads. I don't have to know how to upload it to YouTube. I have no idea how that happens. It seems like magic. It automatically does it itself. When I say this is absolutely seamless and beyond easy, not to mention the idea of the cost, this cost is so absolutely minimal. I would encourage you to reach out and get the actual cost of what it is cost for the select board as well as the school committee to do this. We have been doing this nonstop. This cost is not $500,000. It's not $50,000. It's minimal. If there is one thing that passes as far as citizens articles, I would say this is so impactful for democracy in this town, for accountability, for transparency. There is absolutely no reason in my mindset. And again, this is coming from the most tech illiterate person I know. I have to quite often go to my 10 and 12-year-old to help me with my tech. If I am able to do this, there is no one who can turn on a computer that cannot do this. I would be hard to believe that someone could not do this.
Who can I talk to in the school department to get the bottom line number? Because somehow or another, the phone calls that have been made by Jeff Schrippman, the chair of this committee, has not been able to turn up somebody to give us numbers. And they're just like, it's so, there's such a reluctance.
Reach out to Michelle Cresta. She's our finance director and our assistant superintendent of operations. She's incredibly communicative. She doesn't get back to you right away. We're rolling out a full budget.
You have time.
Yeah.
What's her last name again?
Cresta, Cresta. If you call our central administration, she's prompt number 4.
Thank you
but
so
again,
much, Sarah.
I plan to speak at town meeting about this. There just simply no justification to not have this, in the argument that it's impactful in a costly way that would deter it. I track our budgets exceedingly closely, and there is not ever been a prohibitive cost to this.
And
Thank
one
you,
more
Sarah.
thing, I do think that we should try, that it would be wonderful if it happened to the entire state of Massachusetts. And it's important. I don't know how to keep people informed about that and try to make that happen, but it should happen for every town.
Yeah, no, and this is great. It's allowed, from my point of view, it's allowed parents to be more engaged in their children's education. Our demographic, parents are putting kids to bed at that time. They have little ones. They're not going to get a babysitter every Thursday night, but they will Zoom in and they'll make it happen. Or better yet, they'll go on YouTube the next day and have a recap.
And it only benefits our taxpayers, our voters, our town for more people to know what's going on. So I really hope this passes.
Thank you, Sarah. Oh my gosh, you're so great. I mean, again, the chair of the school committee, speaking out here with us guys, this is important, and thank you so much, Sarah.
You're welcome.
And Lynn, we're gonna move to the next one if that's okay with you, just because we're getting we're just watching, being cognizant of people's time.
And I'm sorry, I have another meeting of Sustainable Marblehead in 15 minutes.
Don't worry, we're gonna, all right, as long as, I think we've got all the questions for you, so we're gonna move to the next one. I don't even know, it might be me. Oh, no, thank goodness it's not me. Jonathan
Hi.
Letterman.
So I'll keep this really quick. Obviously, the first two articles that were discussed are actually a lot more important than this one. But this article has to do with the deadlines for pulling nomination papers. So some of you who are watching may remember that prior to 2019, our town election was the week after town meeting. So town meeting is the first Monday of May. Our town election was the next Tuesday after that. And, if you wanted to run for town meeting, run for elected office, you had to make your decision well ahead of town meeting. So in 2019 at town meeting, Walter Horan, who's our Democratic registrar of voters in town, brought a couple of articles together and proposed moving the town election to basically the third Tuesday of June, which falls around the 19th, 20th, 21st in any given year. And part of the reason for doing that is that we typically had some type of override election happening anyway during that time. So it only made sense to consolidate the two elections and have them, you don't have to hire details. It's all done at once and people can look at the, override questions and the candidates at the same time. So that happened, and that's enforced, and that's been working well. When you look at our calendar, one of the things that was not adopted in that 2019 change of venue was the way nomination papers are submitted. Now, there's a lot of minutia about this, but basically, in order to run for office, you have to pull papers 35 days plus 14 days based on state law before an election. And what that means, based on our current calendar of the first Monday being town meeting and essentially the third Tuesday of June being the town election, is that you have to make your decision about whether you're going to run for office before town meeting. And actually, in most years, it actually corresponds to the day of town meeting. So town meeting starts at 7, you have to make your decision by 5 p.m. So there's no window to go to town meeting and decide, you know what, I'm going to get more involved. I was dissatisfied with the way elected officials were, behaved, the way they answered questions. So this is really an accountability question. Now, there's a special provision in state law that's called Chapter 53, Section 9A, which allows towns to adopt language which shortens that 2 weeks to 2 days. It's really 48 hours. So had this been adopted in 2019, it would essentially give another 12 days to make that decision about running for office. So all this does is it adopts what many other towns have done, which is our local decision that we're going to shorten the amount of time people have before they return their papers, before they take out papers, so that people have more time to make a decision about running for office. It's super simple, should be non-controversial, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but there's a lot more to discuss, and this should be fairly uncontroversial. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any questions, Jen?
I wasn't sure, Beanie Elizabeth, if you had a question. She was just asking me how to raise her hand in the chat, so. Not sure. All right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
Okay,
I'm
go ahead.
like a Zoom idiot tonight. I'm so sorry. This is actually embarrassing.
Not
I've
at all.
become my mom in front of all of you.
We're all friends.
That's no big deal.
Jonathan, I'm a little bit, I guess to me, like the value of somebody going to town meeting and at town meeting deciding that they don't like how people are running things and then deciding to run, like that feels a little bit dangerous to me. Like to me, folks like Jim and Tom and Brett and Aaron and Alexa, and like the list could go on and on, Allison last year, like people that having myself taking an advantage of these online sessions where I've been able to observe people participating, learning, understanding how our local government works, how each of the boards work that they want to be involved in, and then deciding to run. Like if you did that at town meeting, and like, I don't know, it feels a little bit just kind of like off the cuff for me. And I'm just wondering, I'm trying to understand like what the value is of that versus the way it works now, which encourages people to actually like learn about the board in which that they want to run for before they go like full force into it, deciding that they have a better idea.
Okay, I'm really glad you asked that question because there are a lot of good answers to that question. To start with, we've had a pattern in town, and notwithstanding some of the earlier comments, we've had moderators who, by the way, run for one-year terms, who really have not given people an opportunity to speak. They've cut people off. They've run the meeting really in an autocratic way. There's one good example of people, it's an incredibly powerful position, an important position that allows free-flowing discussion. Now, could we do this just for the moderator? Sure, this isn't targeting the moderator, but that's one example. So let's take a couple of other examples. Oftentimes during town meeting, there are questions that through the moderator are posed to elected boards. And oftentimes the town council will get up and say, well, that's a decision that's going to be made by the elected board. And I myself asked a question at town meeting once and said, well, which elected board is it? Board of select board. Okay, the select board is sitting here in the room. I'd like to pose that question through the moderator to them. What do they plan to do based on the outcome of the decision that's being made by town meeting? And they all sit there silently and smile because they don't have to answer the question. There's no accountability. And the reality is that the vast majority of people who attend town meeting are more informed about town government than almost anyone else and most other residents. It's just, if you're interested, you go, even if, maybe you watch on TV because you can't make it, but typically they're people who are either being dragged because there's a article that, or they're people who are regulars. And it's really the regulars who are the ones that end up being the candidates in future elections. But how people behave at town meeting is important. And I think that people should know that if they don't answer questions, if they don't inform the town meeting, that there is a chance that someone in that town meeting may decide to run. So I understand your point. I think that the vast majority of people in town who run for elected office have a pretty good sense of what they're looking for. And I don't think that most people will just decide they're going to run at the, on a, short notice. It would be very difficult to run and win if you just were running as a single issue, one article question. But there's some really good candidates that are always on the fence. And oftentimes they'll make a decision a week, 2 weeks before town meeting because they say, you know what, we're hiding stuff. So you look at what's been going on, even at the state of the town this year, and there's stuff that's being covered up, right? And they're saying, well, by the time we get to town meeting, we'll be able to give you a report on that. Well, that's a little bit late for someone to make a decision about whether they want to get involved. Now, I see Erin in the group. I know that she's not one of those people. I think Alexa is not one of those people. I think they've been really fostering transparency. But to me, a lot of the questions that gets asked at town meeting have very close bearing on the candidates who are running and candidates who could be running. And, this isn't an obscure kind of thing. This language in the state law is designed to shorten the window so people have a little bit more time to run for office. In our case, it's just a happenstance of our town meeting and election calendar. So that's sort of my answer to your question. I see Brett and Sarah are there with their hands up.
The quick question I had is, I think one of the biggest potential opponents might be the town clerk, just because they have to print the ballot, get it certified, and then printed in time. So I just want to make sure, have you talked to the town clerk yet? Or I just, that to me, I think it's just, I know she's always very cognizant about time and turnover and vetting, counting to make sure somebody got on the ballot. So I just want to make sure.
So the answer to that question is I have not talked with her yet. I think that I was interested in getting this on the docket for town meeting and getting it, making the deadline. My intent all along has been to talk with her about this, but I'll tell you that the reality is that most people who are running make their decision well before that. And to the extent that one or two candidates show up, bear in mind also that it isn't like an eternity that or a tiny amount of time that she has to respond, because the signatures actually have to be given to the registrars 35 days before the election. And then there's another deadline for when the ballots have to get printed. So in the event that there were a bunch of people who showed up to run, yeah, they'd have to go and spend some time certifying the signatures, but it's a very light lift. This is just not something that a reasonable person could argue is just a burden on the town clerk. It is her job. She has 2 full-time staffers. Certifying signatures, if it takes them 5 minutes a signature, they're going to be done pretty quick. And it doesn't take 5 minutes. It's probably a minute per signature. They use a computer. Like, this is easy stuff. So I think that might be, and this isn't, in any way, I think that it isn't something that incumbents would necessarily be in favor of. And I have to tell you that one could argue that there have been other things that happen at town meeting that don't lend themselves toward, or I should say, I was, over the last 20 years, I moved back to town in 2000. I've been pretty disturbed with the way the moderators have handled town meeting. And I think that at the bare minimum, if I could narrow this just to the moderator, I think there should be an opportunity to go to town meeting, see how people are treated, and then make a decision as to whether you're going to run for moderator, because it's been really terrible with our last 2 moderators. They cut people off, and I think that just is something that needs to change. That should be a welcoming environment where people can ask questions and they aren't shut down. So I understand there may be some opposition to this, but I think that the signature burden on the town clerk shouldn't be one of those. I hope I've answered your question. I see Sarah with her hand up.
Hi, me again. It's become a little bit of Waldo. Well, to speak briefly to that, but then I had another point. So, Brett, you would know this, but some people don't realize after the due date, there's a 10-day window of having an availability to withdraw your nomination papers. And so the clerk can't even start her process of, getting the ballot ready until that 10-day window is over. So my understanding is what you're looking to do is shorten that 10-day window to 2 days, correct?
There are different ways that people count it. It has to do with 14 days, but they're calendar days versus 48 business hours. But in effect, yes, it would shorten that window.
Okay, so the date that the clerk starts getting ballots ready per se would not change. We wouldn't be tightening that window. It would just be tightening the window that candidates have to say, wait, what was I thinking out of here?
Or I'm going to run. Because
So to the point about running, there is, what Beanie was saying, the possibility of someone just being like, I don't like what's going on here, and I'm going to throw my hat in the ring. But more importantly, there's people at town meeting that I've heard through the years that I might not have crossed in my day-to-day path that I've heard and left town meeting thinking, wow, that person's really tuned in. And I want to reach out to that person. That person seems like they'd be a great asset to our town. And I got to tell you, when I first ran, it was because people approached me and said, I like what you're saying. I like how you're doing business. Please run. And I'm willing to bet that's how a lot of us got here. And so I like the opportunity of being able to hear, we have such a wealth of knowledge and expertise in our town. I really like the idea of being able to kind of broaden my sphere of who I see speak and have that opportunity that maybe someone got up and spoke to 4 articles that I had never heard from before and really spoke eloquently and well on the topic. I would like the opportunity to be able to, I'm a huge fan of cold calling people, of calling someone and saying, have you thought of this? And because a lot of times people haven't thought of it.
Right.
And it really takes a little bit of encouragement. So I see this as broadening our opportunity for bringing expertise to the table.
Great.
I like that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We miss anybody else, or do we get everybody?
Think so. We should probably move on.
Move on. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jonathan. Oh, and it's me. Okay. Last year I brought this article forward to create standard operating procedures for our boards and committees. And we lost by 7 votes. It was a painful loss. However, I had so many people come up to me while I was out in my yard or walking through town or grabbing a coffee, asking me to please submit this article again. And so we are, not only because of the outpouring of support, but also because we believe it's important. What we are asking for this year is we narrowed it down to just a handful of boards and arguably some of the more powerful boards. We should note that the school committee already has standard operating procedures. So obviously they would not be included in here because I believe they are mandated by the by Massachusetts Commonwealth law. So we are asking for the select board, the Board of Health, Harbors and Water, and Parks and Rec, or Recreation and Parks, as it's formally known, to create operating procedures. And this essentially is going to tell us, the public, the voters, what they do and how do they make decisions. What is your mission? What are qualifications that you want in your members? And what is your structure? Most importantly to us is what are the powers and duties of these boards? What powers do they actually have? And what I think we'll find is there's probably some overlap, and we might become a little bit more efficient when we document all these and figure out, hey, if you're doing that as well, why are we doing it? You do yours and we'll do this over here and divide and conquer, and we'll be that much more successful. I just think that I've never worked for an organization that has completely, these procedures are nowhere to be found. It's odd to me. So I think it's important. I think it'll help our elected leaders to be more efficient. Like I said, I think it might open up some communication. And for the last 7 months, I've heard the chair of the select board talk about policies and procedures in several meetings and how important they are. And I would say I would absolutely agree. And so I ask for your vote on May 1st for this article. And I think E's raised her hand already. So that's it. That's my spiel. I was trying to go fast. E, go for it.
Okay, so this one I'm like totally on board with, but I'm nervous about it. Last year, I think the way this worked was it was like, I think like first up was Gary and next up was John Dowd, and then the whole thing sinks. Like, what's the, like, how, I'm like, my whole thing is like, I want it to pass. I want it to pass. I don't want it to be like the, whatever, the gas powered leaf blowers thing where people just start to look at it as like a joke, where like you're actually trying to like do a thing that's really important. And all of a sudden it becomes like, I don't know, sort of a laughing stock to people. So not to say that it was, but I think this is that because I think you actually proposed this 2 years ago and then last year.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it was written last year like felt really good. And then it was like shot down in the most wild way. But also I'll say that I'm not going to go up after, I'm not going to like,
no, I know what you're saying.
Harry Gregory and John Dowd, like, and many people in town feel the same way. So
yeah. I don't have a problem with it.
What the strategy is.
well, one, I will absolutely stand up to them. That's no problem. It's not my favorite thing, but I certainly will. And bring up the fact that both of them being in finance and banking, their world is all about policies and procedures, and they handle a lot of money and a lot of our money. And as such, I feel that it adds a layer of or a level of accountability when you have things documented. Not only that, it allows for, sort of similar to, I think, in the 3-year term article, is that when new people come on board, they know what to do, and or if we have a turnover of some sort, it fills the gap when that person's not there anymore. I think there's a couple things that we're going to do differently is that we fine-tuned it to, similar to Lynn's article, we fine-tuned it to just several boards rather than all the boards and committees. Because, you know, why does the Marblehead Forever Committee need to document their policies and procedures? You know, so we sort of fine-tuned it there. And we actually used in the second paragraph there, we actually used the same language that's in, I think it's Article 8, boards and committees from our current bylaws. Both the Affordable Housing Trust and the Capital Planning Committee all have these elements in the bylaw. So we sort of were strategic in our use of language and copying what's already documented, but we just use these boards instead. So yeah, but thank you, E. Totally understand.
I guess my only question is, like, are there people in Harbors and Waters that are gonna stand up and support? Like,
oh, I don't know. I mean, I planned on talking. I actually invited them today for this meeting. I didn't hear back from them. So I'll just keep reaching out and try and engage in some sort of conversation prior to, so they don't feel that we're attacking them, because we're not. We are just saying that it's something that needs to be done. So we'll keep trying and keep reaching out, and ultimately it's not really up to them, although I know what you're saying in terms of their power, they can be intimidating. But it is up to our voters, and hopefully if you keep talking to people and I keep talking to people, and we'll get all of our networks out there and vote this thing in on May 1st.
okay.
Thanks, E.
We have a couple more folks. I think Erin Noonan had her hand up next. Erin, go ahead.
Erin
Yeah,
Noonan.
yes. Thanks, Megan. Thanks for bringing it up again. This is mind-blowing to me that we need to have like an article presented. This is so basic, standard practice for every like for select boards across the Commonwealth. I've created a list of good ones to model for our board. You know, there's plenty. This is not reinventing the wheel. We could even start with some boilerplate ones and, you know, and then tweak them, you know, some Marblehead specific kind of things. But I have raised this with our former chair. I eventually was able to get a meeting with our interim and the chair around starting this process.
Great.
I would be happy and willing to, you know, make a motion of support for it at the select board of your article. You know, it's hard for me to even like comprehend an intellectually honest reason why we wouldn't do this. You know, obviously policies and procedures ensure consistency, they standardize the process, reduce the learning curve, they provide for accountability. And again, it's just so basic and just, I mean, I think it's so obvious. You know, and then you and I can talk about whether or not, you know, the outcome, I'm not sure, like, you know, if that would be helpful, if it didn't go that way, the way that, you know, you and I would like it to go, if that would be helpful or hurtful. To bring it forward in that way, but I'm happy to do that.
Thank you,
I
Erin.
just want to say, sorry, I have to jump off, like,
no,
after this
please.
because I have to go to my son's playing at the high school
Go.
during the halftime.
No, it's okay. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you
here
for bringing
and for
it,
your
and
support.
we can talk more about that too later.
Great. Thank you, Erin, very, very much.
I think Sarah Fox was next. Sarah, you there?
Yep. Again, to echo Erin, I can't comprehend what the aversion to this would be. Anybody who watched the State of the Town the other night really should be able to capture in a few quick points how this would benefit our town. I've heard Erin and Alexa speak often asking for this. Alexa at the State of the Town really articulated how many towns, if not the majority of towns, have part of their policies and procedures, maximum reliance on free cash is one of their items. Things like this could have kept us from essentially running up onto the rocks where we are right now. It's good governance. It literally is good governance. And I listened to a lot of the arguments at town meeting that other individuals made. And quite honestly, I didn't even, I could not even see that the argument was valid.
Right.
Essentially, it's good, it is good governance, and it's where our accountability lies. And if people are scared of outlining these policies and procedures, that really should be affecting how people are voting at the ballot box.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. Penny Blaisdell.
I will be brief. I think the biggest argument was that we're all volunteers. We don't have time for this. And
Yes.
my sense is, you know, as a commissioner for the state, it is standard procedure. We all do it. I'm a volunteer. I wouldn't do this if I realized, you know, I mean, I wouldn't be doing this unless I realized there were some obligations. And I think that if people feel it's too much work to be able to document what they're doing, they shouldn't run for the position in the first place. So I completely agree that this, and I'm glad that you've narrowed it down so people will realize this is not a big deal.
Thank you, Penny.
Thanks, Penny. And we have Allison Taylor.
Hi.
Hi.
School committee. So thank you for this. I agree with everyone that has spoken before. I also just want to harken back to it. And I understand, obviously, it's a volunteer position. I understand the enormous amount of work that goes into that. And I'm grateful for everybody that does step up to the plate. It's a lot of work, good, bad, and ugly. So, but I think that it also harkens back to what I said before of like, we are trying to run a business. My dog even agrees. You can hear a warning. We're trying to run a business, and to run a business successfully and repeatedly following the same procedures and having those standard operating protocols, it is critical to success. Otherwise, whether or not you want it to, the optics are very bad. The optics are bad from a transparency perspective. The optics are bad for, well, why don't you want to have? Why do we have this special case and this special case? And I think that's an important thing to remember as well. And I'm grateful for Alexa and Erin, who have both,
Yes.
for sure echoed that need. And I'm grateful for everybody that volunteers, whether or not they think there should be, standard protocols. But I think that we really need to look at it from that perspective. And particularly this year, given the state of the town, we could definitely use some more protocols and procedures, I think, to help pull us out.
Yes, definitely, Allison. Thank you.
And we have Kurt. I'm not sure which Kurt it is, but Kurt James. I figured.
Yeah, hey folks. So just
Hey.
maybe to play the devil's advocate or to be the cynical person, I sat right behind Gary Gregory at the town meeting, Megan, when you were introducing your proposal. And my takeaway was, there are certain folks in town that really don't like people looking over their shoulder and, understanding how things work and kind of interfering in their business and the way they like to run things. And, especially in lieu of, Jen, your article about the bank and various other things that are going on, I think that it kind of is helpful to pull the curtain back and, get a better sense of how people are appointed or not even considered for an appointment and, have them be accountable to us. So I really support this initiative. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kurt.
Okay. So I think in the interest of time, we want to sort of chug along
We're
here.
good? Yeah, we're good. I'll
we
keep
have
going.
one
And we got
final one.
we got Dan. I know
Dan
it's
Albert.
7:15, Dan. So sorry that we're bringing you on so late because you have such an important article.
Thank you. Am I up then?
You're up. Go,
All
go,
right.
go.
Fantastic. Thanks for putting this together, Megan, and thanks for all of you who have expertise in dealing with the town and your engagement with all these issues. I've already learned a lot just about how things are done. I'm excited. I'm sure all of these are going to pass no problem at all because I've really been impressed with the amount of thought that went into them. I think as Jen said at the outset, no pun intended, this has a lot of moving parts. And I'm going to do my best to focus just on a little. And I'll tell you a bit about the history of why I need to be doing this, but also try to get you to understand what this is. So let me see if I can't put up a couple of slides here. I think I am going to take command. Okay. How's that? Are we looking at my?
Yep.
We look at my screen. All right. So who are you going to call? So all of this starts with a problem we have in town. We have it everywhere. You have a street sign you want a stop sign. Who do you call? Do you call the chief of police? There's heavy traffic on your street. Do you call the chief of police? Do you call the DPW? Do you call Amy McHugh and say we need a stop sign? There have been a number of incidents recently at the middle school, pretty dangerous incidents for kids. So who do I call if that's my kid? Do I call Superintendent Bucky? The thing is, we don't really know. There's no central place for the town to receive and respond to citizen concerns. So the idea is to create a traffic safety advisory committee. It actually has two parts. And by the way, I just want to say, this is kind of my dress rehearsal with this. The article is still in process. I know what I want. I know how this works, but I also am really striving to get the messaging right so that people understand it and ultimately it succeeds. So, what I want to say is at the end of the day, this is about dead kids. This is about preventing more dead children, but that is not a winning message as far as I've been able to figure out. So let me back up from that and tell you, and actually I want to set myself a timer because I'll go on forever. So there's two parts to this idea of a traffic safety advisory committee. The first part is we're going to fulfill the commitments that we've already made, and I'll show you some of those in a second, and then also to connect those. The other part, though, is to respond to those requests for a stop sign or for slowing down traffic on a street. And we need a more robust way to receive those as a town and to respond to them. I have done, excuse me, I've been studying traffic for 35, 40 years. I am obsessed about it, but I have more recently begun to engage with this question of how do you solve this problem? And I've looked at a number of towns and tried to emulate their best practices. Some of the best I found, Dedham, Groveland, Barnstable, and even, God forbid, Swampscott, have traffic safety advisory committees, and they're very effective. Groveland, for example, just got $300,000 in a state grant thanks to their work in this area. So this would be a bylaw. This would create a committee. There are certain nuts and bolt things that this committee has to have. It has to have 3 residents who are not members of any other boards or employees of the town. It has to have a rotating chair. It has to present data routinely and keep data publicly accessible. All kinds of nuts and bolts things that, again, I've derived from examining other towns. But I want to focus on more of the picture of what the idea is, what this would do. And that first part is the bringing together the commitments that we've already made. We've made a commitment under our Complete Streets policy. We formed, we pledged allegiance and made alliances to a state program called Safe Routes to Schools. We have a railroad right-of-way trail plan that's laid out. And in 2020, people may not be aware of this, but we passed an article allowing the town to anywhere we want, without a traffic study, without asking anybody, we can reduce the speed limit on any road to 25 miles an hour. And if we say so, 20 miles an hour by declaring it a safety zone. And then the second part is that receiving traffic calming requests. And I'll talk about that in a second. But let me take you through some of these programs. So first of all, Complete Streets, you can see it on the top there. Mass DOT has a program called Complete Streets. There's a misapprehension amongst people in town government that this is about money coming into town. And in fact, the town of Marblehead's gotten, I think it's close to $1 million now in grants that are channeled through Complete Streets. But the state is trying to leverage its money, just like we as a town try to leverage our money. What the state wants us to do as a town, and all towns to do, is spend our own money on making complete streets. And so the money they give us is a carrot. And if we get that money, we get it because we pledged to make our streets complete. So what is a complete street? Well, for the last 100 years, streets, 120 years ago, streets used to be for everyone. There were push carts on them, kids played on them, horse and buggies went down them, people walked on them. But then with the arrival of the automobile, they've become conduits for motor vehicles. And that's sort of the way we thought of them for 100 years. There has been in the last 20 years a transformation, and it's the idea that streets are really not just for cars, but for pedestrians, cyclists, delivery drivers, people on mass transit, and so forth. And so the idea across the state, across the country, using federal money filtered through the states, is to transform our streets and make them safe and accessible and pleasant for everybody. So that's one program. The rail trail, I think people are familiar with, but if you take a look down on the corner there, you'll see, for example, this rail trail plan that we were presented in 2020 has what are called raised crosswalks or table crosswalks. And that's that image there that you're biking across. Well, we were presented that. We said, town people said, yeah, that's great, and gave that public comment. We told the state we were going to do that, and then we didn't do it. And I'm still trying to get a clear answer as to why we didn't do it. So that's a commitment we made, we haven't kept. Safe routes to schools. People may be familiar with this, safe routes to schools. People think of as bike to school day, walk to school day, encouraging kids in bicycle safety. What they don't understand, I think, a lot is that there's an enormous amount of expertise that we can get from the state to rejigger the way we drop off kids and pick up kids, to change the infrastructure around our schools. And ultimately, there's $500,000 in grant funding available through this program. Again, Groveland just got $300,000 to do that. And then there's something else, and it's the term of art is traffic calming. But there are all kinds of traffic engineering ways to do this, which is about slowing traffic down, getting motor vehicles to be more pleasant, more accommodating of other uses of the street and other people. And I'll talk to you about that in just a sec. But each of those is a silo, right? So people think of safe routes to schools as a schools thing, the rail trail is another thing, and so forth. And we need to bring those all together. So let me talk about traffic calming. It's funny, when I wanted to bring this article, the first thing I did was call our town moderator, Jack Attridge. And I said, this is something I need to do. He said, oh, you should go talk to Thatcher. Oh, you should talk to Chief King. And what I don't think he realized, and I tried to impress upon him, is I've been at this for a dozen years. I've been at this since Allie Kasten was killed, where the rail trail crosses at Mohawk and Pleasant. I didn't want to bring a town meeting article, and in fact, I don't think this is the best way to do it. But it turns out this is the way it's done. And I want to tell you the story of Dara's her 5-year crosswalk saga. And I want to thank Jen for putting me on to this story. So there is a crosswalk, you may know, at Legs Hill Road and Tedesco Street. It has a flashing beacon. It has signs. Dara Van Remortel wanted this put in about 2008, 2009. She went to the town. She said, can we get a crosswalk? They said no. She got her neighbors and friends and the people around Tedesco Street to sign a petition. 150 people. Can we get a crosswalk? No. Go to the traffic committee. So believe it or not, we have a traffic committee. To me, this proves that the traffic committee doesn't work. What was the traffic committee, or what is the traffic committee? The traffic committee is the chief of police, the town manager, the town engineer, pretty much it. The same people that she was trying to reach all along. And what did they say? No, can't be done. So what did Dara ultimately do? Town meeting article, 2014, very simple. I want a crosswalk at Tedesco and Lakes Hill, and the town will spend the money on it. And guess what? 183 to 15, almost unanimously, the people of town said, yeah, obviously that's a no-brainer. But the reality is that's not a win. That's a failure. It's a failure because there's just no way to run a railroad. We can't have everybody asking for money to get their particular pet project done without any kind of more comprehensive understanding of the situation. So again, lots of moving parts. I've already talked too long. I tried to just hit on a couple of key things. To me, the first thing people are going to say is, oh my God, not another committee. But it's really not about a committee per se. In fact, the hope is to eliminate some completely ineffectual sham committees like we have a complete streets committee. We have a traffic committee. Neither of them is fit for purpose. It's about creating a process so the public can come forward with their concerns, have them heard, have them shared publicly, have the people who listen to them be accountable. We're also following other towns. Other towns do this. It's not that hard. It's not that bizarre. Okay. Now, and people, I think Jen was the last one who asked me, well, what's your goal here? I'm like, make the world a better place. Make it so that everybody walks and bikes and so forth. Well, I don't pretend that this is the place. That this gets us there, but I do think it's a first step, and it's a critical and also an achievable first step. And by the way, one thing I want feedback on is my branding of TSAC. I don't know. My wife said that doesn't sound good, but again, really, I'm hoping to hear from people. I'm hoping that no matter what your traffic concerns are, whether it's the bump outs or the new intersection, or there's not enough space for bicycles, or there's too many kids riding bikes dangerously on the streets, you can call me. You have my email. There's my phone number. I will follow up on it because that's what I do. So thanks for listening to me. People are interested in saying.
Thank you, Dan.
That's awesome, Dan.
I don't see any hands up. Penny Blaisdell did ask if we could put the verbiage back up again real quick for Dan's article.
You betcha.
While we close.
It's a little bit long, and Penny, I can email this to you too. Oops, sorry. I'm hitting all sorts of buttons. So it's a really long, lot of language. But again, we can send this out.
Yeah, so we'll let folks can take a look at that. We will send it out. Just in the interest of time, because we're at 7:29 and we were longer than we thought we'd be. So we were going to have Tom McMahon, but I think he had to jump off to the Board of Health meeting. So we'll have him at the next meeting. I was going to spend a few minutes on state of the town, but I think in the interest of time, if you want to move that slide, Megan.
We can do it real
I just want to say, the kickoff to the town budget season begins every year with the state of the town, which took place last week. Normally, our finance director presents it, which we don't have one right now. So our town administrator, Thatcher Keyser, presented basically the financial status of the town. Suffice to say, we are looking at not enough revenue to cover the increase in expenses between contractual requirements to our unions and other contracts that we have. The expectation at this point is that we don't have enough revenue to cover that. So the plan will be to present a level funded budget. So some form of a budget with the expected revenues, and then probably 1 or 2 or even 3 other budgets that show an increase in revenue that would be found with or would occur with a Proposition 2.5 override successfully passing at town meeting and a ballot. This is a discussion, I think, on its own. I think Megan, you and I agree with that.
Yeah.
So just want to put it out there. The material is available on the town website. And then we can also send some link. We could also put some links on our website to take a look at both the written portion of this as well as the video recording of the presentation. And then we'd like to have maybe some guest speakers at our next event, to subject matter experts who can speak to this, including hopefully 1 or 2 or more of our select board members.
Perfect. Yeah. And it's a lot of, if you listen to the state of town, it was a lot to process. It was a lot of graphs. It was a lot of numbers, a lot of information, especially if it's the first time that you've tuned into something like that. So what we would like to do, and it may not be this year, but at some point we would like to put together sort of a glossary of terms, a basic understanding of, what it is that you're looking for. What are the sort of key indicators of how we're doing, and just make it easy. Just make it easy. I think one of the easiest parts to look at, if you are interested in, because they are available on the town website, are maybe the last 3-4 years. And if you have more time, then go back farther of the various summaries from the finance committee. I put the last year's up because it's the reality. The FinCon chair, who is an incredibly responsive committee member, he is Alec Goolsby. He said it last year that Marblehead will likely require an override next year, meaning 2023, to simply maintain the same town and school services that residents currently receive. That's a very powerful statement. And that was made last year. And if you watch the state of the town last week, nothing has really, I don't believe anyway, at least it wasn't revealed that anything's been done since Alec made that recommendation, which again, pretty powerful statement from the chairman of the finance committee saying that we have some work to do. So like Jen said, we're going to talk more about this. We just didn't want to let it go without at least acknowledging it, but we would like to get a few of the finance experts and some other, maybe some other people that are interested, and put together something for March. One of the questions I had too is, I know there was talk of, I don't know, just of ideas. Like I would like to know some of the ideas they have for generating new revenue and what they are. And there just seems to be so many, if we had the time to put together an ideation session of some sort, I just feel like we could come together as a community and come up with some pretty amazing ideas. I think I'm really, I don't have too much more to say about that. If there's questions, I think Sarah had her
Fox
hand
has her
raised.
hand up. I think
I know Angela just joined us, so if there's questions that you guys have, I would love to hear from you.
Sarah?
I would encourage anybody that didn't watch it to watch it, and as long, also if you have time to watch previous years, because what's so powerful to me is that sadly, this isn't a new message. We've been hearing every year, maybe we can make it another year. Next year, we need this. Next year, we need this. And it's essentially planned running up on the rocks from a fiscal standpoint. And I've been really grateful to hear the voices of Alexa and Aaron all year saying, when are we going to start getting to work on this? When are we going to start getting to work on this? And I just haven't seen any response from the majority of the committee. So, 3 years ago, Jason Silva made a statement in a meeting. We're no longer cutting fat. We're now cutting skin and bone, flesh and bone. And we've been cutting flesh and bone for many years. And it's really, really important for people to understand that, to ask and to dig into how we got here, and to demand a plan to get us away from here. Because if we have to go with the 1.3, which is what we can afford right now, those are going to be catastrophic effects as far as the delivery of service in this town. And so I really encourage people to watch those, not only this meeting, but past years, so people have an idea of how by we, I mean, the financial outlook of this town has been very clear for many years that we were planning to run out of money. And none of us would run our house that way. So I really encourage people to kind of pay attention to how we got here, who got us here, and to really demand some answers.
Thank you, Sarah. Amen. I think Brett next?
Yeah, Brett was next, yeah.
Yeah, well, I know there's going to be a larger meeting, but I just couldn't go without saying this. If you look at the February 1st, 2022 article written by Christine, back when we had a Marblehead reporter, her opening, her second paragraph said, Finance Director Stephen Poulos warning that fiscal year 2024 could quite possibly be the year of a deficit. Former Town Administrator Jason Silva warned of. In addition to the Finance Director, in addition to the Chair of the Finance Committee, you also had the Finance Director going on the record at that meeting. And it also, again, quoted Erin, about, we need to do this and do something about it. And you saw some responses in there from then Chair Jackie Feldbecker and Moses Greer. So I really, again, it's the February 1st, 2022 article. So I really recommend, that folks read that and agree with Sarah going back. And that's the reason why I got up and spoke. I did at the State of the Town, because Moses tried to put it down and put it to the side. And the analogy he used was a wall. This wasn't like a car driving down the street and a bouncing ball suddenly darted out with a child. We've been driving towards a big wall for a long time. This is something we've known, we've seen. And so for them to start action literally 3 months to the day before is very troublesome. So I agree with Sarah wholeheartedly. Do your research, look at last year's, look at the statements from our politicians then, look at the politicians now. And I think that's going to change a lot of people come years.
I think so too, Brett. Thank you. And I'm so appreciative of you standing up at State of the Town. Really, really appreciate it. So thank you. Was there somebody else, Jen? I'm not sure.
I just have two quick things. First of all, I totally agree with everybody. It's kind of strange to me, like how there isn't, what I thought was happening last year was that one of the reasons that some of the members of the select board weren't full, and even some of the members of the finance committee weren't fully behind the school override, was because they were saying, we 100% know we're going to have to go for a town override next year. And we want to be able to do that together, like in step. And as much, I don't want to get into it, but that somewhat made, it's like, okay, so now we know we're doing this. So we're going to start planning for it. And it was surprising to me that even in that meeting, there wasn't more let's get to it. Thatcher, I think, put out 3 questions that he thought, I thought he actually did a nice job of kind of just saying okay, so these are the questions that I think you all need to address. And then it was there was no let's plan a time to have a discussion about these questions that Thatcher just raised. It was almost strange, number one. And then number two, one thing that would be interesting to me, and we don't have to do this now, but I'm trying to understand whether we can revenue our way out of any of this.
Good point.
It's always been confusing to me, that we just have to go tax everybody again and again. And I actually do feel that's super hard on all of us. That's just not, and what I'm a little bit confused about is okay, if there's hesitancy of an override, why isn't there constant discussion of revenues and how to bring revenues into the town? And what even would you be able to do? Because I kind of feel what I've heard and just asking some people is some of us are a little naive in terms of how the revenues work. We bring businesses in, but the businesses provide taxes to the state and those aren't necessarily to the town. So maybe we can't revenue our way out of it. And I just am interested to understand what, I don't think that any of us, most of us don't fully get what the levers are. And it's hard to support just like an override without the discussion of like, these are the levers we're looking at. This is what we think we could get out of each one of these. And this is why we have to land an override. So.
No, it's good. And to build on that, I know in some of the discussions leading up to the school committee's override presentation for last year's town meeting, you know, there are several people who got up to speak and said, you know, voters who came up and said, it's not that we're against the override, it's that we're not sure, A, if we want the funds to be used for what you're proposing, and or B, whether we have the, you know, the trust level for the elected officials at the time was also in question, and whether or not we, you know, if we say yes and we do this override, do we have the full faith and trust in leadership to be transparent and where they're going to be allocating that money and how they're going to be using money, and are they going to be managing the money, or are we going to have to do this every 3 to 5 years? And those are things to be looked at as well. And, you know, I think this is a great conversation, and I think it's definitely one that I'd like to make as a focal point, because I don't know how to fix this. To your point, can we revenue our way out of this? I don't know. But I think it's a great conversation, E. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on that note, I think in the
We're
hour,
good?
I think we're good. So
We're
everyone,
good.
thank you so much for attending tonight, and we look forward to seeing everyone next month.
I know, definitely. And keep in touch, subscribe to our email. I think many of the attendees already did that. You know, start talking about this. Be a storyteller. Get out there on your networks and your social media, your emails, whatever. Sitting around at the Ripper, as Jim just said, you know, or wherever you're sitting, and just start the conversation about town meeting and some ways that we can all work together. And I thank you all for being here. I know we went over. So, and everybody who spoke, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for arranging.
Good night, everybody.
Of course. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Oh, you're so welcome.